The real reasons why China is in Africa. Economic relations between China and Africa, one part of more general Africa-China relations, began in the 7th century and continue through the present day. China is fast becoming the dominant player in Africa, and its role in the continent is constantly increasing. In fact, China has offered more aid to Africa than any other country, and its economic interest in the region has grown significantly. With China's increasing presence, there are various unanswered questions about their true intentions with this growing involvement. Some see it as a protectionist policy to secure resources for its domestic market, while others believe that it is part of China's plan to build new markets for its manufactured goods and services as a way to boost its domestic economy amid flagging growth. However, there are many who have different opinions on why China is investing so much time and money in Africa. In this video, we will explore some of these explanations and see which one makes sense. But before we do, if you are new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe and turn on notifications for more interesting videos about Africa. 1. China's role in Africa. China's presence in Africa can be traced back to the 1960s, when it began its first foreign direct investment in what was then known as the Portuguese colonies. However, it was not until the late 1990s that China stepped up its involvement in the continent. Today, there are several key reasons behind this growing interest. First, China is a global trading nation, and African countries are important trading partners. This means that China gains valuable access to these countries' economies and resources. Moreover, Africa's natural resources are also of great interest to China. With China's concerns about the growing global competition for resources, China's investments in African countries can help secure these resources for the Chinese marketplace. 2. China as a manufacturer to rebuild Africa's economy. Another explanation that is commonly given for why China is investing in Africa is that it is part of China's plan to rebuild its manufacturing sector. This is especially true for Africa's industries that have fallen out of favor in the West and that have the potential to offer good business opportunities for Chinese manufacturers. For example, the African apparel industry has the potential to be a great market for Chinese manufacturers. However, this industry is at risk of closure in the West due to a number of factors, such as high production costs and cheaper African competition. With Africa's low wages and weak economies, African apparel is an industry that is particularly appealing to Chinese investors as it offers good business opportunities, low production costs, and good market access to the rest of the world. 3. China wants to build new markets. Another explanation that is often given for the increasing Chinese involvement in Africa is that it is part of China's plan to build new markets for its manufactured goods and services. This means that Chinese manufacturers are looking to expand their market share globally and are targeting African countries as a way to boost their export numbers. Many like to think that Chinese investments in Africa are part of this plan. This is especially true for Africa's manufacturing industries that are often seen as a cheap alternative for Chinese manufacturers that want to expand into new export markets. For example, China has become a major player in the South African mining and mining equipment industry. Therefore, the rationale is that Chinese investors are looking to expand into other mining-related industries like the mining of iron ore, coal, and other minerals in Africa. 4. Protectionist policy to secure resources. Many like to see China's involvement in Africa as a way for China to secure additional resources for its domestic market. However, this is not necessarily the case. Chinese companies have always been global investors and have invested in many locations as a way to expand their business and access new markets. If anything, it is more likely that Chinese investments in Africa are driven by China's concerns about the growing competition for resources. This is especially true when we look at Africa's natural resources. With Africa's rich resources, China sees the continent as a major source of minerals and natural resources that can help boost its economic growth. This is especially true for Africa's oil and mineral-rich countries like Angola and Libya, which are seen as key resources for China's economic growth. 5. Increase its global influence and presence. One of the most commonly mentioned reasons behind China's growing presence in Africa is that it wants to increase its global influence and presence. This means that China sees Africa as a key resource for boosting its presence in the world. With the growing competition for resources, China sees Africa as a key source of raw materials that can be used to feed China's growing economy. With Africa's low wages, African countries are seen as a cheap source of labor for China's growing manufacturing sector. 6. To help its own citizens. Another commonly mentioned reason behind China's growing interest in Africa is to help its own citizens. This means that Chinese investors see Africa as a way to help their own citizens that are looking for work. For example, Chinese investors see Africa as a good source of cheap labor for building infrastructure that has to be built within China. Conclusion: China is growing fast and becoming a major player in African politics, economics, trade, and investment. The Chinese government is keen to deepen its ties with the continent and is investing heavily in its infrastructure, trade, and businesses in Africa. The Chinese government sees Africa as a new market for its products and services that can help boost growth in China's economy. In addition, China is also building up its military presence in nations like Sudan and South Sudan to help protect Chinese interests in these countries. The African Union chairperson and president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, praised China's aid and investment strategy in Africa as a source of deep transformation at the September 2018 Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in Beijing. According to Kagame, China and Africa's collaboration is built on respect for one another and serves the interests of both parties. If their participation at the summit is any indication, the majority of African leaders of state and governments may share this opinion. Despite African leadership's embrace of China as a valued partner, the view that Beijing is a predatory actor in Africa, attempting to recolonize the continent, is also ubiquitous in foreign policy circles, media narratives, and academia. The proponents of this narrative contend that China can save Africa and is a reliable ally. Africa sees China, a nation without a long history of colonial ambitions in Africa, as a potential partner who might offer crucial finance without any conditions. Additionally, they think Beijing respects and is aware of Africa's objectives. China also enjoys a positive reputation among African nations as a state that respects the cultures and states of others. Many heads of state from Africa share this opinion. Africans are well aware of the shortcomings of Chinese assistance and business in Africa, from an imbalance in trade to hefty debt, from poor quality goods to corrupt practices. Africans also know that many Chinese investors lack consideration of sustainability and that some business dealings are in some instances incompatible with the national interests of African countries. The debt trap is not an inevitable outcome of loans. As President Kagame said, the outcome depends on us Africans. Whether or not African governments utilize Chinese loans for productive capital investments is the main criterion that defines the success of Chinese loans to Africa. Accountability to the African people is necessary for the success of these investments by African governments. China or any other non-African nation is not accountable for this. Instead, it is the job of Africans to assure accountability. There you have it, viewers. That brings us to the end of the video. We hope you found the video interesting and informative enough to give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notification icon to be notified when next we upload more important and interesting content in regards to the African continent. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.